What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to another episode of the Oil and Gas Startups. Got a cool episode today. Someone that I've like to call you a good friend.
Yeah,
We've met a couple of times now, and really just like this guy, Jim Fisher from Oracle. Jim, appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today.
absolutely. Great to be here, and thank you.
Yeah. So how do we get introduced? We got introduced to Kevin Rowe, right? And
Through
so
Kevin.
Kevin's also at Oracle, which Kevin, it's funny at Digital Wildcatter's office, you just never know who's passing through here. And Kurt Coburn is friends with Kevin and had invited him to our office. And so me and Kevin just spent 2 hours one day just randomly chatting and hit it off. And so anyways, Oracle, so far, my experience with Oracle is that you guys got some badass guys on the team. So you're batting 1,000 right now.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
But tell me real quick, the reason I wanted to get y'all on the show was, Oracle actually has a cloud infrastructure that they're building, OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And when Kevin told me that, I wasn't even aware that Oracle had cloud. You always hear about AWS, you hear about Azure.
Yep.
And so that kind of took me by surprise. And then he told me what y'all were doing in energy. So why don't you tell me just like real quick, high level overview of what you guys are doing over at Oracle with the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell everybody it's one of the best kept secrets in the industry about cloud infrastructure. So we're on generation 2 of our cloud, which is really unique in the sense that, bigger companies, not to be named, they built out their cloud a few years ago, and they're kind of stuck with what they've built out. And Oracle's done a reinvestment over time. And now the cloud infrastructure we're building up, Gen 2, is just second to none. So performance, scalability, security, and all that stuff is just top notch in it. But one of the things we try to focus on is just there's traditional things you do with cloud infrastructure. You're getting out of a data center, or you're just trying to rationalize your footprint when it comes to carbon zero or something. What we also have is focus on the oil and gas. The energy part is where you and I kind of started talking and getting connected, where we do a lot of development work kind of focused on outcomes. So you put a lot of data into the cloud, you run a lot of applications on top of it, but you're trying to build to an outcome. It's like, what do I want to get to? Is it pipeline integrity? Is it more production? Is it this or is it that? So really the biggest part of our business is moving all that to the cloud, traditional type business. They call them lift and shifts and stuff like that. But what we're really trying to focus on here is how do we bring more value from other providers that they would bring and just say, hey, we can help you work towards a means to an end, one part of our business. And the other ones, which you'd mentioned too, I think when you spent time with Kevin, he probably talked to you a lot about our high performance computing side of our business.
Yeah.
As you know this industry as well as I do, Colin, you've been around, but when you start getting into seismic data and the number of passes you can make, the complexity of it and the cost to do that and the time to do that, if you can shorten all those, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
And
The amount of compute that we have in this industry, I mean, those data sets, especially for subsurface seismic are huge. And, it's funny, Chuck tells this story. I can't remember who did this, but he held this seminar, this talk at a university, and this isn't verbatim, but the original talk was evaluating subsurface seismic, and he said like 3 college kids showed up. 3 months later, he goes back and titles it "Using Machine Learning to Analyze Subsurface Seismic." He said, "Pack the room," and I don't think a lot of the younger generation and people outside oil and gas realize just how technical this industry is and how much compute is involved. And, talking to Kevin, it sounds like, I know y'all have a partnership with NVIDIA and really, using their GPUs and focusing on machine learning applications and things of that nature. And this, you look at all the applications of like real world things, applications that are actually doing things in the oil and gas industry is, I mean, a great industry for those.
It's unbelievable right now. I think the pace at which things are moving. It's interesting you mentioned about did a session on subsurface data and 3 people and call it AI ML and you pack the room. It's so true in our business too. It's all about the naming and the labeling. But every discussion we have with every customer in the oil and gas sector, it's about data. It's about machine learning. It's about artificial intelligence and how do we leverage that and do more with less. Because there's so much data out there, like you said. There's just hordes and hordes of data that these companies have been sitting on. A lot of it they haven't had time, or a lot of them they haven't had the ability to actually access and run these algorithms on it. So it's unbelievable right now.
Yeah,
The pace.
and I mean, you're an oil and gas guy by background as well. Long time Schlumberger, I believe. You're actually in wireline, weren't you?
I was, yeah. So I'm a petroleum engineer by trade.
Okay.
So yeah, when I graduated college, I went to work for Schlumberger,
Where'd
and
you graduate from?
I went to West Virginia University.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
cool. Shout
Awesome.
out to my Mountaineers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Love
So
West Virginia.
yeah,
It's a
well,
good
thank you.
place. Yeah.
It is. It
Yeah.
was interesting. Sidebar story, but it's yeah, I was looking at petroleum engineering and mining engineering.
Yeah.
And my grandfather took me underground, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to work underground, So
Oh, I want to
I
hear.
went to
No, I
this.
want to hear about that. I mean,
Yeah.
did you come from a family of coal miners?
My grandfather was a coal miner.
That's
There's a lot of other coal miners, and even on my wife's side of the family now, coal mining was in their blood. So
That's
that whole
awesome.
Appalachian region, as you would expect,
Yeah.
but it's just wasn't a place that I thought I'd want to work.
No,
So
I always, obviously I come from oil field background and roughnecking, but I always have a lot of respect for coal
yeah,
miners because I'm like, man, like roughnecking's hard, but coal mining
yeah,
looks even worse than roughnecking does. And did you ever see the movie October Sky?
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
love that movie. It's one of my
unbelievable.
favorite movies
Yeah.
of all time. But you just kind of get like a sense of like, yeah, this is really shitty work. It sucks.
Yeah.
And so I think that was pretty easy logic for you to come to. Like, man, I don't know if I want to go
Yeah.
work in a coal mine.
Well, it was funny too. The timing was 84-ish, 85. I can't
Yeah.
remember exactly. And the industry was on one of the typical downturns, right? So,
Yeah,
going into petroleum engineering at that time, you'd really start to question your sanity. It's like, is this really the smartest thing to do?
you're actually
So,
one of the few. There's this chart that always sticks out in my mind, and it's a bimodal graph of petroleum engineering graduates, and you had this big spike in the early 80s, and then with the crash, I
yeah,
mean, just dipped down, and no one got into petroleum engineering in the 90s, late 80s and
yep,
90s, and then leading up to shale, you
yep,
started seeing it climb up again.
yeah.
And so you're probably small handful of people that was actually pursuing a degree in petroleum engineering.
Well, it was interesting at West Virginia. We used to, I'm told, graduate, 100 petroleum engineers a year. My graduating class was 7.
Yes.
And 6 of them went to work for Schlumberger, and one of them went to work for Halliburton. So, it's like
Yeah.
it's all on the services side.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's the hard data right there, like that you were just part of a very small class, and so that's interesting to hear because we talk about the great crew change a lot, and just boomers and millennials, and just not a lot of Gen Xers in the industry, and so it was a good contrarian play.
Oh yeah.
That's when you want to be going to school for petroleum engineering. I mean, if you're looking at supply and demand, but so you get out and then went to Schlumberger directly out of there. Where did you go and what did you do?
Yeah. So wireline engineer. I think like yourself, I went to
Yeah,
East Texas.
nice.
Actually, not a little town. It's a great town. You've been up to Tyler,
Yeah,
Texas? Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's where I started. And
Tyler's
just
not a bad place to
unbelievable.
do
It is
some
really
oil field
nice.
work. There's much worse places in the world
Absolutely.
to live, and so so you're out in the field running a truck.
Running crews.
Cool,
Started out in open hole.
cool.
Then moved to a cased hole and did a little bit of pressure testing and type of work like that.
Nice. When you're doing open hole, was that mainly logging, or were you doing pipe recovery?
It was
What?
all logging.
All
And
logging. Yeah.
it's interesting talking about seismic. I remember, my experience to seismic was I was sitting on, we'd lower sensors into the well, and thumper crews would come in. You just sit there for days
Yeah.
and just gather data.
Yeah.
And that's like, is this really scientific? And it's like, yeah, just stay another 3 or 4 days. You're fine.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I never knew.
It's much more
was it 30
scientific
years
than
ago?
how we drill water wells out in West Texas. You just get a witcher and with your little things, and I'm like,
So you really saw that.
I've seen it work.
It
I've
worked.
seen it work. So
Oh,
if you
why
can't,
not?
if it works, it works. But yeah, it's not a very scientific method. So at least when we use thumper trucks and
Oh
stuff,
yeah.
it looks like it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go run wireline, and then I mean, it sounds like you built a pretty long career out of Schlumberger. So kind of tell me about the progression.
Yeah,
Of that.
Schlumberger back then, they had it's a pretty big company in the sense that oil and gas, and they also had some other things under what they called resource management, and that was their whole electricity, water, and gas division.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I spent 10 years just in the oil field side, and you and I were chatting earlier about different states and complexities of speed limits and the fun of those, and so yeah, I traveled pretty much all around different districts: New Mexico, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Even did a stint back up in the Northeast for some of the work. There were actually activity in Indiana and Illinois, which I never knew about
Yeah.
initially, but
Yeah.
they were pretty busy at
Those
that
are
time.
actually some of the only like Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Kansas are like the only places in the U.S. that I haven't got to like, go be
Yeah.
boots on the ground. But I mean, there's quite a bit of mom and pop
Oh,
operators in those places, and making they're not banger wells like we have out
no,
in the Permian, but they're profitable
they're
wells, and
profitable.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So then, fast forward to, about 10 years in that part of the oil business was Schlumberger. And, I think you and I chatted a little bit on just the upticks and the downturns. It was just time to do something a little bit different. But Schlumberger had what they called their resource management group. So I moved over to there, and that's when I kind of went into what they sell into utilities. So electricity, water, gas meters, meter reading software, networking, so you can read meters. That was kind of that business under Schlumberger.
okay,
And they kept it for another, I don't know, 5-6 years. And they finally sold it off. It wasn't core to their business. Kind of
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
And so
So
they sold
sad.
it off.
Yeah, I didn't know they did those types of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people had no idea. So when they sold it off, I just stayed when it was sold off.
I'm
With
gonna put you on the
partner
hot
party.
seat real quick.
Please
I
do.
just had something
Yep.
come to mind. What do you think of the new name and branding? Going from iconic Schlumberger to SLB. I want your hot take on this.
Yeah. I think we might have talked a little bit.
Just probably like, no, I'm trying to get them as a client. I can't say.
I remember when they went from the boxed rectangle type logo from
Yeah.
Schlumberger, and it just looked, I forget the font, but they just took the name
Yeah,
Schlumberger out.
yeah.
And the whole concept was, and I'm using air quotes, right, is hey, we're out of the box now. And
Oh,
it's kind of
really?
like, yeah, it's like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I saw this one, and I'm like, so you had the big Schlumberger. Now we're just going to reduce it to SLB now. So
Yeah, what's so funny though is design is funny because things come back into style
absolutely. Yep.
over long enough period of time. You look at, have you ever, do you know Comstock Resources logo?
I do. Well, I don't know the logo. I know
Oh,
them.
hold on. Let me pull this up and show it to you real quick. And if you're at home listening to this, you have to, you need to go Google Comstock's logo because it's so funny to me because this thing looks like, do you remember the computer game Oregon Trail? This
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like,
Oh, yep.
I mean,
do.
this looks like a logo from late 80s,
It
early
does.
90s. And they've just kept it over time. But the thing is like it's kind of coming back into style and into fashion. Because a lot of companies are taking away actual design elements of their logos and just going to simplified words like
Yep.
SLB,
Yep.
where I'm like, man, I would love to bring back the old school
Yeah.
box Schlumberger logo. I think the old school is kind of getting cool again.
I
So
do too.
yeah. All right, we'll leave it. Jim didn't give his official opinion on it, but well, he likes the box logo. That's what I took away from that.
That's your takeaway.
So how did you was there anything between Schlumberger and Oracle, or did you go to Oracle from there?
No, so it was the divestiture of the Schlumberger part of the business and utilities,
Oh,
electricity,
got you.
water, and gas. So
Okay.
a company purchased them called Itron. They were kind of a very focused on the utility technology group out of Pacific Northwest. So they purchased the assets and they stayed with them for about, probably 8 years.
Okay.
And then sales and marketing and business development, stuff like that. And then left them, and I was going to be a millionaire, so I went to a startup. Right?
Yeah.
That's how you become a millionaire, right?
Yeah,
of course,
of course.
Makes sense.
It's the only logical
Exactly.
thing that happens when you go to a startup.
That's right. So I did about an 18-month startup with a company, and we did well at first, and then things kind of slowed down. So at the end of that 18 months, I went to work for Siemens, massive company. So
Yeah.
that's a logical step, right? You go to
Yeah.
work for a startup where there's very few people and worried about paychecks and stuff. You
Yeah.
just go to a massively big company
Yeah.
where, like Siemens,
You
350,000
get some
people.
security. You're like, yeah,
Absolutely. Yep.
screw the startup life. I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then I did that.
Trust
for
me, I
about
feel
8
like that
years.
sometimes.
Yeah, some of your resume calls. And then left Siemens and went to work for Oracle after that.
Cool.
So it's been about 4 years with Oracle.
Nice. Yeah, Oracle's an interesting company to me because it's a giant in the tech industry, one of the OGs in tech. But when you look at it from, let's say a technical innovation
Yeah.
perspective, maybe it's not as sexy as other companies are, but like when I talked to Kevin about the things that y'all are building out, these high performance networks, I'm like, oh, this is super cool stuff.
Yeah.
And the types of companies that y'all are working with are really cool as well. So tell me kind of about that, from Oracle kind of going from this traditional enterprise database provider for, massive enterprises to saying, hey, we want to build out this high performance GPU network for machine learning applications. I mean, that seems kind of like a fundamental shift in the thinking from me outside looking in. How do y'all think about that?
No, it's actually a great question and even better observation because one thing Oracle was really good at, you just outlined all the things that Oracle's been solid at, performing at, and delivering. And one of the ways the company invests in thinking about it is where's the future going, right?
Hmm.
So as you're bringing along all those applications and the database and that type of technology, the next logical step is what we're seeing today, right? We were talking about AI and ML and the whole analytics platform went on top of it. How do you leverage legacy stuff? So it was a natural fit for us to take what we have installed from a base standpoint, leverage that information and take it to the next logical step. And a lot of it's just, forward thinking. Some people within Oracle, a lot higher than me, are actually looking at the market where it's going and doing these cool things around
Yeah.
GPUs and all the focus around AI and ML. Seen some of the stuff that we've been doing, like construction engineering. There's a group within Oracle, but you can go out and start wearing smart glasses and with video on it and be able to find out, you don't have your hard hat on. Those don't look like steel-toed shoes. Your gloves aren't on PPE.
Yeah, one time I was out on Shell Perdido out in the Gulf, and I was with Shell's R&D team from the Netherlands, and we were running this downhole tool that they had made. I was helping them run it, and one of the scientists, he had on Google glasses, and this is back in like 2015.
Yeah.
Like when Google glasses, I mean, the public couldn't get them. And I was talking to him like, hey, you look like a nerd. Why are you wearing this? And they were
Just
talking
let
about,
you know.
yeah, they're talking about, augmented reality and the applications that they could use on an offshore rig. Like, hey, you're looking at this tool, and you know how rig hands are. Like one comes up to me, he's like, hey, I heard they can see through your clothes and see your ass with those glasses. And so, anyways, but it is funny to see, like, back then, 6 to 8 years ago, I mean, that was kind of pie in the sky thinking. Like, you see things were going that way, but now we actually have the infrastructure to start enabling those things to actually work. And part of that is, just the compute
It is
behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, and even within Oracle, there's a group, IoT, Internet of Things, which has been trendy for a while. But you think about that part of an organization in any company, they're all looking at edge devices, bringing back data, or making decisions at the edge, not necessarily always bringing it back. So
Yeah.
all that takes some type of computation, it'll take some type of networking, takes some type of speed, and that whole part of the industry, in my opinion, is just that's where it is. And to your question earlier, that's Oracle's looked at. We've had all this foundation for years.
Mm-hmm.
How do we leverage that? And that's what
Yeah.
we're seeing today with some of the things we're doing.
Do y'all do anything around edge computing?
We do. So we do a lot more around. We've got some, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, so I'll get chastised by somebody, I'm sure. but anyway, it's Rover or something like that. But it's a lot of work that we do on offshore rigs. So it
Gotcha.
allows for connectivity, allows for data gathering, and
Yeah, because that's what's
localized
actually
processing.
really interesting to me. Actually, John Calfan, who's on our team, came over from a startup that was focused on hardware for edge computing, and I was really started thinking about the evolution of servers, really, because you went from on premise, and when we started this podcast back in, it's even that long ago, it was 2018, 4.5 years ago. I mean, a lot of oil and gas companies still weren't putting anything in the cloud, all on-prem servers. And then you move to the cloud, but then you start saying like, oh, actually, we have a lot of computational needs on site. And so now it starts moving back to like on-prem, but edge computing. And so seeing like this evolution of where, the computers actually sit is super fascinating to me because and there's not a, it's not a one and only approach either, like there's some stuff that can go up to the cloud, but maybe there's some critical real-time data that you need on a frac job or a drilling rig that you need to be processing right there on site. And so, it's funny. I had a guy message me on Twitter the other day, and I don't know who he is. He's Anon, but he told me that he spent his entire career in oil and gas, and now he's in the cloud business. Actually, it might be you. Jim's like,
where are we going with this?
Yeah. But he was just talking to me in messages, and he's like, it's crazy. he's like, one, it's crazy being out of oil and gas. He's like, I love oil and gas. It's in my blood, so I miss it. But he's like, it's weird being in this industry that has all this tailwind. He's like, because the demand for compute is insatiable. He's like, I just can't. It's like it seems like it's never going to end. There's just so much demand, and what we're doing in AI and machine learning is just making that problem exponentially worse. And so that's I was sorry for going on a long rant here. I'm dumping a lot of thoughts on you, but it's something that I'm really interested in. I was sitting at a table with people way smarter than me. Chase, who's the CEO of Crusoe Energy, which is doing Bitcoin mining and cloud computing services off of their servers, and then another guy who's from MIT, and he's a expert in zero proof knowledge technology, and talking to these guys about the future of decentralized servers. And I'm not talking to them. I'm absorbing and I'm listening because
Yeah.
they're much smarter than I am. But it's just a fascinating space because you have the big players,
Yeah.
like Oracle, but then you have smaller guys that are building decentralized, and it's almost like you can't even compete with each other because there's so much demand that
Oh yeah.
the pie is just so big, right? And so, as y'all move forward as a company let's talk about energy specifically. What are who are y'all looking to work with in the energy industry? What applications do y'all think y'all best serve? Kind of give me some insight
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. And maybe go back a little bit to one of your comments on the whole decentralized piece, because I think it's spot on. One of the things that we originally faced within, especially the oil and gas, you talk about some things can go to the cloud, some need to remain on premise. But really, that whole architecture that you design and lay out is most critical step, right? Because there's latency between data, there's latency between systems. And it's just understanding that and spending the time to map it out, draw it out, and work through that. Because to your point, then you get to a hybrid model where things that need to go to the cloud, things that don't. But now there's efficiencies built in,
Hmm.
and they're deliberate decisions, right? It's not just it's the only way it works. It's logical. It's the
Yeah.
right path.
Yeah.
But we spend a lot of time with that. I think that's critical. But one of the things we're trying to look and work with are some of the smaller startups or some of the companies that are looking for those outcomes that's going to change their business dramatically. And I don't have one, or I would tell you what it is today, but I have ones in other industry where we do things. And like utility vertical, we do vegetation management. So we build applications pulling in satellite data for growth of trees that go over power lines. So it used to be traditionally utilities go out and just drive and look and say, oh, we need to cut here next year and put it on a list and go do it. Now you do this all remote. You pull in satellite data, you do drone data, you do all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of that for the companies in oil and gas. I start thinking about pipeline integrity. I start thinking about security of systems. I start thinking about in the refineries become more of like just a smart city to me on how the data, you've got dashboards, you've got information coming back.
Hmm.
And I don't think we've really, hit the tip of the iceberg on those yet. We need to spend more time with companies that, hey, I know how to do these things, but what I don't have is the foundational data underpinning. And that's where Oracle come in with cloud infrastructure. And we'll probably have databases of some sort at that customer just because we've had so much of that market for so many years. So
Yeah,
it's a
you already
natural
have
fit.
penetration through the
Absolutely.
database. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how satellite data, GIS data is being used in oil and gas. I think the mineral bros, the mineral funds took advantage of it first because you could start getting ahead of drilling programs by seeing, oh, hey, there's pads being built around here, or they're moving in drilling rigs or frac crews and things of that nature. And you start looking at asset security, integrity, like you're talking about on pipelines. And that's all. You look at methane mitigation and detection as well. I've had a lot of startups on here that are both building software platforms and the physical hardware, the sensors to measure these things, but being able to process that and then make decisions on that, like you need the right infrastructure to be able to handle all of that. And so it's a pretty cool time
Oh, yeah.
to be working in the energy industry. One, because the energy industry is growing and becoming more dynamic. And so, you talk about like machine learning applications. You see it in EVs with autonomous driving and things of that nature. And so, it seems like there's a ton of applications for machine learning, and we just need the infrastructure to be able to, yeah. So for you, what are you most excited about in what you get to do every day, except for working with Kevin Rowe. I know that's probably it's probably the highlight of your day
It is the highlight of
working
my
with
day.
Kevin. I'm just
Yes.
giving him a shout out here.
Let's do. I love it.
But what gets you most excited about what you guys are doing and what you're doing in the energy industry?
The coolest thing is just these types of things, right? I'm getting to spend time with you and kind of talking about the industry because I think that's where a lot of this starts, where we all start throwing out ideas. And I know we're both going to walk away with something and say, hey, I thought of something.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
can do this. And it's the same thing with spending time with customers, walking through where their problems are. Because, you can read anybody's website with their annual reports and their ESGs, and you can find, oh, here's my most 5 important things in my business today, and it's blah, blah, blah. And those are important. I get it. But really spending time with the teams, on the ground or in the field and finding out, well, these are my real pain points that can actually change the business inherently, how we make decisions or our performance or our output. And so that's the exciting part for me, spending time with those teams
Yeah.
and building out those outcomes. Because most of that stuff, it doesn't take a lot.
Yeah.
We've got some really cool development tools on OCI. As long as we can get to the data, we can clean it. It's good, clean data. We can build applications pretty quick. We're not talking, these aren't months and weeks. These are hours,
Yeah.
to where then we can figure out, yeah, that makes sense. Now let's build a process behind it or something like
Very
that. So
cool.
that's really the cool part for me. That's fun.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking about something when you were saying about the imagery, when looking where pads are being poured. And I can remember early days when I started in the oil field, a couple of wells were being drilled in East Texas and kind of a wildcat area, if you
Yeah.
will, even though it wasn't, but they would put up these big blinders on it. And it's the first time I ever really saw that. And like, yeah, it's highly secret, right? They don't want anybody to know. And I can't imagine today's world. Nothing's secret, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you hide anything in today's world? But that was it. They just put really tall fencing up with the with the ribbons or the banners around it, so you couldn't see in.
You do that now, you're calling attention to yourself.
Absolutely
Like it
you are.
pops up easy on imagery, right?
And then you'll probably have all these drones flying by looking over what's going on here.
We're recording a podcast later today. I wish that we scheduled these better to where y'all could actually meet each other. But David Toole from Geolumina is coming on, and David is a geologist by trade, I believe. But Geolumina is it's computer vision for subsurface seismic, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
That would be neat.
And so you talk about some cool machine learning, artificial intelligence applications. And, what's cool about energy is you have guys like David, 10 years domain expertise in his field, sees these problems, is familiar with these new technologies, sees what we're doing with computer vision over in autonomous driving and things of that nature. And it's like, oh, how can we apply this to subsurface to where a computer can see things and seismic data better than a human can.
Absolutely,
and augment
yeah.
that. So very cool time to be working in the industry. Now, if someone's listening to this episode and they want to reach out to you, one, let's talk about companies that should be reaching out to you. EMPs. I know you have a couple of meetings with EMPs today.
Yep.
I won't drop the names. I'm sure tech companies, maybe startups, maybe they need to reach out to Kevin.
Yep.
But who should reach out to y'all, and how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. Any of the EMPs out there that's interested. I mean, it's like you said when you started the podcast. There's a lot of them probably think of Oracle as different. We have their HR software, we have supply chain management, or we have database with them. But hey, we're doing this cool stuff as well on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So absolutely,
So that's all the boring stuff. We're
That's
doing some
right.
cool stuff.
Let's get the exciting stuff now. And a lot of
We're
the
not
tech
bringing
stuff,
on Oracle onto this podcast to talk about HR software. I'll tell you that much.
I love it. And then the tech side of it. Yeah. I mean, if it's not my team specifically, because we do focus on a lot of the bigger, enterprise type customers, but Kevin, another shout out to Kevin, right? But Kevin can help with that, and we'll actually, manage that through the process too.
Very cool.
Service companies too. We're doing a lot of work with service companies.
Yeah,
I mean, because, it's interesting. I visited a colleague of mine, I don't know, it's probably been a year ago, who worked, I started at Schlumberger. He was one of my managers several times. And, he was telling me, and it's just a year ago, he says, Jim, the how we used to do wireline logging has completely changed.
Yeah.
And he walked me through it, and I hadn't thought about it for 20 years. I'm like, wow, it's completely different.
And not even, one of my friends, Andy, shout out Andy, Tano Brown on Twitter, is always posting videos of wireline operations. He's a wireline engineer, and him and I used to work trucks together. And over just the last few years, there's been changes in perforating technology and logging, and it's crazy how fast things evolve and develop. Especially this industry, sometimes you you step back and you're like, man, this industry's so archaic and it takes forever. But if you actually look at it,
Yeah.
a lot of cool things
You
happen
wonder.
pretty quickly. So, dude, I appreciate you coming on the show and telling us about what you guys are doing. If you're listening to the show and you want to reach out to Jim, go find him on LinkedIn. Also, find Kevin Rowe on LinkedIn. He's here in Houston. Great guy. We'll leave some links to their LinkedIn's in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, share it on LinkedIn, share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram. Jim, thanks for joining me, man.
Absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you, Colin.